New York Democratic Representative Jamaal Bowman spilled major tea about Israel and AIPAC's grip on Capitol Hill. Speaking with Charlemagne the God on The Breakfast Club last Thursday, the congressman, who's sitting in one of the most hotly contested seats up for re-election this year, claimed that AIPAC is racist and has been working behind the scenes to unseat him since he publicly called for a ceasefire in Gaza. Let's listen.
Now, why are both parties so beholden to Israel? Is it because of the money that comes from AIPAC? Like, why? What is it?
I think that's part of it. I think that's a major part of it. AIPAC writes resolutions and bills for us to vote on. And they also fund the re-election campaign of like the majority of members of Congress, Republican and Democrat.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. And if you do something against them, they will come after you very aggressive, like they're doing in my race.
When pressed on why he's supporting President Biden, this is what he told Charlemagne the God.
But you said, the guy, George Latimer, is supporting genocide in Gaza.
Yes.
Right? So why support him? People say the same thing about President Biden.
Yeah.
So how do you like? Because that's when it gets. That's when it feels like everybody's talking out both sides of their mouth.
That's the toughest question I get, right? And that's why we have been.
You can't say don't support this guy because he supports what's going on, the genocide in Gaza, but then support President Biden.
Yeah, so that's the number one thing we've been consistently critical of the president on is his response to Gaza and his response to Netanyahu and not doing more to hold Netanyahu accountable. The U.S. government should not be sending another weapon to Israel right now. We should not be sending another dime to Israel right now, period.
Bowman isn't only facing backlash from AIPAC. His former colleague and fellow progressive, ostensibly, Mondaire Jones, who seems intent on spoiling House races, appears to be quietly working against him as well. Jones endorsed AIPAC-backed opponent George Latimer. Former New York State Representative posted, quote, Mondaire Jones trying his hardest to mess up races for even more progressive seats was sadly 100% on my bingo card this year. In a text thread with Jones, reporter Timmy Facholia asked the ex-rep last summer if he would endorse Bowman against a hypothetical AIPAC challenger, and he responded that Bowman didn't need his endorsement. A supporter of Bowman, Pete Hager, posted on X, quote, Mondaire Jones kneecapped Yulene Liu against Levi Strauss and her Levi Strauss heir, Dan Goldman, in the New York 10 primary. Now he's doing it to Jamaal Bowman against AIPAC lapdog George Latimer. So for those who forgot, in midterms last cycle, there was redistricting in New York State that jumbled up the kind of subtle expectations for which folks were going to run in which district. And Mondaire Jones ended up getting into this race where there was already an established progressive candidate, Yulene Liu, and he was perceived to basically have split the progressive vote, leading to Dan Goldman winning in that primary and then losing in his race, ultimately contributing to New York being basically the state that cost Democrats from having a shot at actually winning the House back last year. Okay, so Mondaire Jones was not exactly covered in glory after that. But because he's black and young and gay, there's still this sort of vibe that he's a progressive. People will lump him in with the squad. Now that he's openly running against running against Jamaal Bowman, and not running against him rather, but endorsing his AIPAC-backed candidate, that seems to be him basically committing to the role of the heel and committing to his role as an establishment actor. And I should say, I went to law school with Mondaire Jones interpersonally. I liked him, but I did have a conversation with him back when he was first running for office and I was working for the Bernie campaign. And I asked him, hey, independent media could be really helpful to you. Are you a progressive? And I asked him about his views on a number of issues. And when it came to Israel, his attitude was very much like, what am I going to do? The demographics of my state are what they are, basically implying that because he lives in a district with a large Jewish community, that he was not going to be progressive when it came to Palestine.
Yeah, I am reading in Semaphore. It's disgusting. Progressives seething about this betrayal from Mondaire Jones. Barbara Lee says she's appalled. Cori Bush says it's disgusting. Summerlee says it's incredibly disappointing. Yes, it does seem, I can understand why progressives would be pretty frustrated about this.
Yeah, and look, remember, AIPAC announced that they were going to be spending $100 million to oust members of the squad. They've been spending heavily, obviously, in this race against Jamaal Bowman. Now Jamaal Bowman has picked up a lot of money after some of the attack ads have gone up against him. His May earnings were 3 times what he pulled in April. He brought in $1 million in May. It does seem like progressive voters are rallying around him in some respects. And it's interesting that you mentioned Summer Lee there, because she was the first example of a progressive who got targeted by AIPAC and managed to survive that challenge. So it does seem like things are shifting. We obviously have been covering what happened to Thomas Massie. He also survived his challenge. So I don't think it's quite as cut and dry as it used to seem, that no one could really out fundraise AIPAC, that if AIPAC got involved in your race, that it really kind of spelled doom for your political chances. It'll be really interesting to see if this is actually, if there's a backlash effect here. And then go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right. According to Politico, saying that it might have backfired for Bowman, who was able to raise 1.7 million more, and that was just reported in the last 48 hours.
Yeah.
So there's definitely an ability to, campaign on not being the
right.
attack.
Which, by the way, when Nina Turner was in this situation, she made a choice to not sort of foreground that this was AIPAC, a lobbying group for a foreign country interfering in American elections and accusing me of anti-Semitism. She chose not to go down that route. And there was some discussion about whether that was a wise choice at the time. AIPAC also was choosing not to foreground Israel as an issue. They weren't exactly going after her saying, they did accuse her of anti-Semitism, but they didn't quite go after her saying, you shouldn't vote for her because she's bad on Israel. They more tried to just position her opponent as more progressive than Nina Turner was, framing, for example, the fact that she had objected, Nina Turner had objected to the DNC platform as, oh, she doesn't like a progressive platform, when she was really objecting to it because it wasn't progressive enough, right? So things like that. So is this a new paradigm also where people who were once maybe afraid to call out AIPAC directly because of accusations of anti-Semitism now aren't, because it's such a mainstream issue now about what AIPAC's about what Israel is doing in Gaza, and the public sympathies are increasingly leaning toward Gaza. One other part of this, sorry.
Yeah, I would just to hit home that point. Thomas Massie tweeted over and over again, calling attention to the AIPAC donation. Every time they would blast a message about him on Twitter, he would quote tweet it and say, he was called out for being, the only Republican voting against Israel like 15 times, and he said, "Why did we vote on Israel and nothing else 15 times in the month of April? Why is this the only issue we're allowed to address?"
Yes, and I think that one other part of this is, and kudos to Charlamagne tha God for landing this question. He asked Jamaal Bowman there, well, if your opponent is so bad because of his beliefs and his support, unconditional support of Israel, why should voters support Joe Biden when he is doing the exact same thing, when your opponent's politics and Biden's politics seem substantively in line? Why are you, Jamaal Bowman, continuing to support Joe Biden when that's the case? And Jamaal Bowman,
Jamaal Bowman,
for some reason, obviously there's no good answer for that. He acknowledges on some level that he doesn't have a good answer for that, which I guess is the best he can do. But, I think a lot of progressives would argue that the good answer for that is to say, you're right. I withdraw my endorsement of Joe Biden. If this is something that's an important enough issue that I might lose my seat over it, certainly I shouldn't continue to run cover for the president who has the exact same agenda as the person who's trying to oust me.
We will continue to follow that. More Rising right after this.